Issue 1. After months of waiting, Hunter Rawlings and his head honchos announced our so-called strategic plan for the University of Iowa. Excellence for the 21st century. We briefly got into this on our last show, and we had a few predictions. I don't think anybody anticipated the depth or breadth of the cuts. Marlene, Perrin, your comment.
I thought the cuts were strange. The cuts included a School of Library Science, the dental hygiene program, privatizing the Memorial Union. The peculiar thing, besides cutting the library school when it's the only one in the state, for example, or the dental hygiene program, which is the only degree program in the state, no consideration, no collection of figures were gathered to determine if it was sensible to privatize the union. Maybe it is, but it sort of seemed like after all of these months that they would have had at least some statistics to back the notions. Now they start the information gathering, which seems to me ought to have come first.
Yeah. Jeff, what about your effect on your department or any other departments that you're aware of? What's the mood?
Well, I think that this is just part of a bigger problem. I mean, the university doesn't have enough money. State appropriations haven't been adequate. I think Terry Branstad and Regents Chairman Marvin Pomeranz continue to talk about excellence, but this is really a charade. I just got a list on my desk today of 475 periodicals that are going to be eliminated. That is, subscriptions are going to be eliminated in the university library. This includes statistical yearbooks from major nations in the world, of basic information that's simply not going to be available here. And, you know, I think there's absolutely no doubt about it that this is the governor's vendetta against the university. He's running down the quality of the university. And the regents are providing political cover for him by talking about excellence and building on strength and so forth. So that's the broad situation. I mean, and administrators are in a bind. They don't have enough money. They have to cut something, and they have to cut somewhere. Now, the problem I have in general with strategic planning is the principle of building on strength. This is the administrator's sort of religious phrase: building on strength. Right. Regent Chairman, building.
So that's why Dutch is out.
Dutch is out. We're not strong in Dutch. In one sense, this is just common sense, right? Obviously, you build on strength, right? But in a state university, there's other things that need to be considered about other than whether a program is itself strong. You can have strong scholars in a weak program. You can be providing a service to the state that is going to be gone if a program is not there, even if it's not a very strong program. I mean, the University of Iowa has other purposes other than to be a research institution, building on strength.
Football team?
Sure. Well, we're building on strength in football.
We're building on strength in football,
so
always.
I think there's a danger, without getting into specific programs, I think there's a danger of an over-reliance on this principle. Mm-hmm. Now, the second principle behind this is that public is worse than private. Right? Look for things that are being done in the public sector and try to abolish them, not because they're not doing a good job, but because we're Republicans and we don't like public institutions. Right. I mean, the University of Iowa Food Service has brought good food to Iowa City. I mean, the State Room is the best restaurant in the state. I mean, there wasn't a good restaurant in Iowa City in 1977, and it's due to the State Room that there's at least one, although there's some others. There's some others here now, and I think this is just Republican dogma. They're saying we're going to privatize because private is better than public. That's all there is to it, and we're going to end up with a Hardee's in the basement of the Union instead of the Union Pantry, which provides excellent coffee. Hardee's coffee is terrible.
I don't think anything like that is going to happen if you privatize the union. I was appalled at how many of the union services, the catering service, for instance, most of the services, with the exception of the bookstore, that these did not turn a profit when they absolutely had cornered the market. You know, a particular segment of the market. It's the only place students can use their little gold cards. You've got an automatic, market right there. They have, with the union catering, they have practically no overhead costs. They have, all these rooms where they don't have to rent out halls. They can give people rooms. They're the only place.
And
the food is good. Fine, but there's no excuse for them not turning a profit anyway.
But I think
that's pretty pathetic. I used to work for union catering.
I think union catering does make a profit.
They might at this
point.
And
they do, in fact, cover the stateroom, which doesn't make a profit. Yeah, but I have no objection to that.
Well,
that's the least, of our problems with the cuts.
Is this the major issue here, privatizing the...
Well, it's one of the issues. The two principles...
These 50 programs that are possibly going to be cut, is that the academic and non-academic programs in the university? Is that a bigger thing?
35 of those are privatizing. A lot of those in that list of 50 are privatizing.
Right.
I think the issues are the programs that will be cut also. A news story this week, for instance, pointed out that most of the programs being cut are programs that are traditionally dominated by women. Dental hygiene, library science, etc.
It's awful. Where's the outrage over this? Where's the...
I think there's just a lot of fatalism. I mean, some things have got to go. I mean, and you know, there's not enough money. Branstad is not going to provide it, and he's going to veto Democratic attempts to provide it. You know, everyone knows that if Don Avis had been elected governor, we wouldn't be in this mess in the university now, because the Democratic majority in the legislature would have provided enough money so we wouldn't have to cut 475 serials out of this. Instead, we made the horrible mistake of putting a Republican
Avinson wanted to give us all free tuition.
Okay,
you know?
what I want more, how about your friends? Are any of them you know, signed up in programs that are going to be cut and are going to have to continue their education elsewhere?
Art students are still the people that I think have been hit hardest, just because I know a lot of kids who, for instance, I think our sculpture department has completely disappeared, just kind of overnight. One semester it was there and the next it wasn't. Things like that. Those students are
I've got the
about
list here. Phase out the undergraduate degree in social work.
Right.
That probably isn't a big deal.
Museum studies.
That would be very few students, but those students keep the Museum of Natural History in McBride going.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure they're going to say, if they were saving the museum, they're not going to save anything by cutting the program.
Yeah, and when the programs you mentioned, dental hygiene, library science, I'm not connected with the university, so I don't quite understand. I mean, is there any internal rage here that we don't read about in the newspapers, or what is really going on, Jeff?
I think that you know, this is just part of a broader underfunding of the university. I mean, this is just part of the cuts. This isn't, you know, and a lot of these cuts.
This is a short list.
You know, far more serious are the lack of faculty to buy equipment. The College of Liberal Arts has no equipment budget this year. Our equipment budget is zero, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a far bigger disaster for most faculty members than this list of cuts. Many of these are cosmetic cuts, I think. Some of them are more serious. But, you know, once you start objecting to specific cuts, you get into a debate on the merits of this or that program, and most people don't have enough information.
Okay. So it says here that there's going to be recommendations. The steering group will make recommendations to the Board of Regents by December 1st, after deans, directors, and faculty and staff reviewing the recommendations and making proposals to the steering group in November. But what I'd like to know from any of you is how many of these cuts are actually going to be taking place? What's your feeling?
Well, what appalls me is that we don't know whether any of these are cuts. We don't know whether any of these are going to save money or cost money, because none of that work has been done yet. So what the final list is going to wind up being, I don't know. The only large programs clearly being targeted, I think, are the library school, the undergraduate social work, dental hygiene. I mean, there is the small. Mm-hmm. That's a much shorter.
You can save money by cutting down a program, and all programs should be reevaluated. I mean, no one is going to argue that all programs should continue indefinitely. And there, you know, this is the time to evaluate them. And you know, I'm just worried that we're so focused on building on strength that the other benefits to people, both the dental hygiene school and the library school, provide upward mobility for women in Iowa into fields where there are job opportunities, right? Now, it's true they can go out of state, but it's going to cost more to go out of state. Right. And my worry with strategic planning is that the focus on building on strength won't take those into consideration. That's my worry. They can take them into consideration, and I think they should. And you know, how it'll come out, I have no idea.
Well, I've heard a lot of students say that they're worried that the University of Iowa will become, you know, the liberal arts college of Iowa, you know, instead of a university because of the cuts. And I think a lot of students certainly are angry, and not because there's a tuition hike and not because there are cuts, but because of just the random or seemingly random nature of these cuts, you know, cutting library hours, for instance, at the main library, things like that, that just seem, you know, just cut so close to the bone that it's kind of scary.
Right. Are we going to know anything before December 1st when the steering group makes its recommendation to the Board of Regents?
Probably not. I don't know, but probably not.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, I have one thing left to say on this the subject, and that's just that, like I said, I don't think students are mad about the tuition hike or the cuts per se, but the combination of those two really do have students angry. And I think one of the best alternatives, although it's not likely to happen, of course, would be that if students are going to pay 60% of their tuition, for instance, and the state's going to pick up the other 40%, or the students pay 70 and the state pays 30, that's fine. But then I think students should have that exact percentage of control over the Board of Regents. They should be able to appoint or elect 60% of the Board of Regents if they're going to pay 60% of their tuition.
Sounds reasonable.
So
Absolutely.
to give them some control. And I think the cuts would be a lot less random if that were the case.
I'm all for it. Okay. What about money from this was floated a couple weeks ago by the state auditor, road money to help bail out the state?
Well, this just shows why Iowa's budget problems are not that big a crisis. I mean, Iowa is not in nearly the trouble that other states are in.
New York, Connecticut.
Yeah, New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts, these states have got absolutely insoluble. New York City is an absolute basket case. Iowa's budget problems could be solved if we had a decent governor who wasn't engaged in a vendetta against AFSCME and higher education. We could solve these problems. We could solve it even without a tax increase. A lot could be done by changing bookkeeping procedures. I think that the state's being misgoverned, and that's why we're dealing with this.
How about the road money that the auditor said?
Well, the people who get the road money will put up a big howl, and they already are. But it makes sense. It's a 2-year trade-off. I think Richard Johnson's idea makes good sense.
Perhaps he should be the Democratic nominee for governor.
Yeah, I agree. And finally on this issue, I'd like to throw out the most radical idea. I mean, Hayden, of course, was in the paper again saying how much money his programs are making, and they're going to be building more facilities for the athletes, permanent bubble, better this, better that, strength, right? And he said something like, people want to come here because of the sports programs and how well they're doing, and that's a reflection on how good the university is. Well, excuse me, but I was under the notion, I guess, that this was a great university before 1979, before Hayden ever came here, when we had 20 consecutive years of losing seasons.
Oh, but we had Evie before that, so.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Hayden should be, in his largesse, should give the rest of the university some money. And
Okay,
say,
the athletic department gave the library a nice donation a few years ago, and now would be a good time to chip in if they've got any money in the drawers of their.
But the football program also supports most of the other programs.
They want a new practice facility though, so
and they really have been very generous in
support women's athletics.
Yes,
they have.
All right. Well, I'll get out by saying this: if John Hayden will agree to give a lot more money to the rest of the university, I will root for Iowa when they play Michigan this week. Issue 2, sparks fly at Kerry rally on campus. No, just kidding. There were no sparks flying. Senator Bob Kerry announced for the presidency in Lincoln on Monday and was at the IMU on Tuesday. Laura Retzler and her helpers managed to get a pretty good crowd, about 350. Weren't you surprised at the crowd, Jeff?
Yes, very surprised.
Were either of you there?
I wasn't there.
Okay, it was a pretty decent crowd. I did object to the scrawling on the sidewalks all over campus, but I understand that's maybe what you have to do to get more students there. But Kerry seemed flat to me, even though it was a big crowd. Jeff, what did you think?
Well, I don't think Kerry's ready for Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he at the reception after the rally, the first question he was asked was, how much do you pay your employees at your restaurant in Omaha? And do you provide health insurance benefits for them? And he completely lost his cool on this question. And I'm told that later he couldn't stop talking about it. Who was that person who asked that question? Was it? And he said, I've heard Iowa's tough, and Iowa is tough. I mean, it's one of the reasons the caucuses are going to be abolished. Iowa people have developed such a higher level of political expertise that Iowans, political junkies, can ask the kind of questions that journalists ought to be asking but are too lazy to do it, and the kind of questions that candidates don't want to hear. Yeah. So I think if Kerry is going to take on Tom Harkin in Iowa, I think he better get some skin thickener or something.
Yeah,
because,
I agree. I mean, I asked him a question about his vote on September 10th, in the Senate when Tom Harkin proposed an amendment to Health and Human Services Appropriation Bill to transfer $3 billion from Defense to HHS, and Kerry voted no. 28 senators voted yes. I asked him about it, and he just said, well, that was Tom's bill, and I didn't agree with everything, and blah, blah, blah. So then later, before he was leaving, I said, Senator Kerry, I'm going to be on TV tomorrow, and I will see local TV. I don't want to make any mistakes here. You know, specifically, were there any programs that you opposed, and why did you vote against it when even George Mitchell and others voted for this? And he said, well, you'll have to just look at the congressional record for my remarks. Now, you know, admittedly, I'm not NBC News, right? But I think that on a bill of this import, he could have been a little more specific. I think you're right, Jeff. He was not ready for Iowa.
Not ready for Iowa. I do think that Kerry will be a serious candidate. I think he, with Harkin and Kerry and possibly Jesse Jackson in the race, that the progressive electorate of the Democratic Party is going to be fragmented. And this could have unpredictable consequences. I think it's very damaging to Harkin to have him in.
Marlene, any thoughts?
Well, maybe his success will depend on his relationship with Deborah Winger.
All right. Who knows? I'll have to wing it. All right, Maura?
I don't have any particular.
All right, then I'm going to follow up, end this by one other comment at the reception afterward. Art Small likened Kerry to John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't know John F. Kennedy, but I was in high school when Kennedy was president. And from what I saw yesterday, Bob Kerry is no John F. Kennedy.
Some people would take that as a compliment, you know.
Issue 3, Taxi to the Bathroom. In the biggest tempest to hit the German department since Goethe put on Lederhosen, the film Taxi zum Klo, I hope for my friends out there that's approximately right, Taxi to the Bathroom, a homoerotic film, was shown last week as part of a series of German films on campus. It's unclear whether it was required that students attend, but some students felt it was required and some were upset by the film's content. Governor Branstad got into it by saying that he was shocked, and Hunter Rawlings today said it was poor judgment. Maura Whalen, sometime student, and I'm sure no prude. What are your thoughts on this whole issue?
Well, first of all, it's not unclear whether the film was required. The film was required. One of the professors admitted that he used the German word for mandatory and did tell the students that they had to discuss the film in class and write a paper about it for the following Monday. So the only person who questioned whether or not it was mandatory was the university in their initial press release, which they have since reputed, and the Daily Iowan, who just, mimicked the university's press release in their article. So I don't think there's any question about it anymore. But I think if this film had been shown in film class, for instance, there could be some justification for showing it, but I don't think I've heard anyone come up with reason one why, a pornographic film of any sort, homosexual or otherwise, needs to be shown
By the way,
in a German conversation
class. I'm glad you said that, because I think too much of this has been that it was a gay film. And to me, it didn't matter whether it was straight or gay, right? Yeah, that wasn't the issue. Jeff, Professor?
Well, I think the essential principle here is that students aren't children. Students are adults, right? They can vote. They can go kill foreigners. They can engage in consensual sex. They are allowed to do things that adults can do. Everything. They can't go in the airliner and sit down and buy a beer until they're 21. But that's the one thing.
Thank God.
That's the one thing. That's the one thing they can't do. It's not the job of the University of Iowa to protect undergraduates of this university from being offended.
But there's a big difference between saying, you can't show this film at the Bijou because we think it's offensive, and saying you must watch this film.
I think that in choosing classroom material, if you had to say, I'm never going to choose anything that will be offensive to students, that teaching would be impoverished at this university.
But there's a big difference.
There are a lot of things.
Let me give you an example. Okay, go ahead.
Let me give you an example. One of the films that's used to teach the early modern social history of France in Europe is a film called The Return of Martin Guerre, which is about the life of some ordinary people in 16th century, which we happen to know something about. Right. This includes a very violent rape. And you know, once you concede the principle that students should be shielded from offensive materials, then this is going to open the door for another group of students to go to Terry Branstad and say, well, now my history professor is showing dirty movies.
But really, no. I mean, in that case, the rape scene is secondary to the content of the film. In this case, this is a pornographic film.
No, this film was not Debbie Does Dallas. This is a film which has an established
Don
place.
Does the bathroom.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
this film has an established place in the canon of German cinema. It was shown. It does.
Yeah.
No, that is
so
entirely.
Is Last Tango in Paris.
That's right.
You know, I mean,
Last Tango is a good point.
Right. It's a good movie,
now
but
we
you
can't
don't
require students to see The Last Tango in Paris by this
Nor
this kind of
should
reason.
you. I mean, I don't think that there's much. What sort of conversation, what sort of vocabulary are students going to pick up from the film anyway?
It's very worthwhile to teach students dirty words in a foreign language. The standards.
But I mean, forcing them to watch some of the acts in this film were just way out there. I mean, this just wasn't, you know, people having sex. I mean, this was way out there.
Right, it was offensive.
Marlene,
Actually, I doubt if it hurt any of them. They've probably seen and heard worse.
I think the people need to, you know,
That's not the point.
students
It's just
make judgments about what to assign.
and unnecessary.
Yeah.
Faculty make mistakes all the time in
this
choosing
is one of them.
materials. Well, I don't think that you're in a position to say.
Well,
one of the mistakes that I made 10 years ago was assigning an essay by John Stuart Mill called On Liberty, where he explains that things which are merely offensive shouldn't be banned by law or by public opinion. He explains that very clearly. Back in the late 70s, students all agreed with that, and they found this a very boring argument. Now it's clear that a lot of students don't agree with that.
Well, obviously,
that public opinion or the law should prohibit certain things.
Please, there's a big difference between saying a film shouldn't be banned by law. Obviously, I would never argue.
By having the president of the university say it's bad judgment.
I don't think it should be banned. At all, but that's the difference between showing it at the Bijou and forcing someone to watch it. I don't think people should be forced to watch something.
Yeah, and I'm getting my opinion from a retired German professor and film critic who I was in consultation with.
There's no question whatsoever that this is an important film in the history of German cinema. There's no one denies that.
Well,
that this is not the kind of thing that people get it by that's for entertainment for prurient purposes, although some people may. This is not merely a series of repetitions of sex acts. There's in my understanding, there's more to it than that. I'm not saying that it was good judgment to show it. I'm just saying that the principle needs to be established that simply because something is offensive to students does not prima facie mean that it is therefore bad judgment to show it.
Throwing in Latin on top of the German.
On the face of it. How about that?
Yeah, thanks. All right. I'm going to get out on this, but I have to throw in this one quote because this to me is just unbelievable. From Judith Aiken, German professor and associate dean in the College of Liberal Arts, who said about the people who were complaining about it, quote, "It's an empowerment for the students to go to their professors or the department and chair and say, this is not an assignment I'm willing to do because it would be offensive to me and my sensibilities, and request an alternative assignment." Jeff, from my contact with 19-year-old students or 20-year-old students, this is asking quite a bit of them. It's an empowerment
and the point
for the students to go to their professors.
I think they should
students didn't know ahead of time. I mean, they were told this might be offensive and there's some homosexuality. Well, there's a big difference between that and having scenes with pedophilia and some of the other things that were involved in that.
There might have been a better warning, but I think these students should be advised to go to this college in Illinois that has canceled the Riverside Theater production. I mean, there are colleges that treat students as children and try to shield them from offensive material. And there are lots of colleges. They could go to colleges in Iowa where they would be shielded from offensive material, but the University of Iowa is not one of them.
All right. Well, I'm gonna never sign up for your class because
shielding
I realize now that you could be passing out essays on liberty and so forth, which somehow are comparable to this film.
Offensive, absolutely. Thanks. Offensive essays.
Issue 4, Bondage of a Different Stripe. On October 15th, the voters in the Iowa City School District are going to be asked to approve an $11.1 million bond issue. The bond issue is designed to add 40 classrooms throughout the district, including a new elementary school, classrooms at City High, fine arts addition, cafeteria at City High, also classroom space at Southeast. Boy, there's a laundry list here. And auditorium at West High. Is anybody opposed to this? Are we all for it? Can we do anything in 2 minutes here to convince everybody to go vote for it, or?
Well,
is it going to pass?
That's a better question.
Is it going to pass?
I'm going to vote for it. I think it's going to have a tough time passing. In fact, I predict it'll fail.
Fail?
Uh-huh.
There's your prediction.
Yeah. All right.
Unfortunately.
It's going to have a tough time. Why is it going to have a tough time?
Well, because it takes a 60% majority, and I think in this climate, in this recessionary climate, anything will have a tough time passing. And historically, school bond issues take 2 or 3 times to get over the hump.
Okay.
I don't know much about our educational needs on that level, but I'm glad it's being presented as a bond issue and giving people a choice one way or the other.
Pay now, pay later, I think. The school district's growing. It's growing, and it's shifting into different areas. I don't think people in our city are going to tolerate overcrowded classrooms for very long. I do agree with Marlene that it's unfortunate that it takes 60%. One of the things Richard Johnson proposed in his budget proposal, which it makes perfect sense, is lowering this to 50% to try to take up some of the slack in terms of construction from the loss of road construction firms. And I think this makes a great deal of sense. I hope it passes, because I think the longer we wait, the greater the cost. So I think the argument for passing it is let's pass it now. I mean, we've got to have the room, we've got to have the classrooms, we're growing.
Issue 5, almost running out of time. No more Dr. Strangelove. Completely unexpectedly, George Bush made huge unilateral cuts on our nuclear weaponry over this past weekend. And one thing that has surprised me, eliminating the tactical nuclear weapons from Europe and Asia, defanging the nuclear bombers and missiles in this country, and yet nobody seems interested in this whole issue. It's beyond me. I mean, this to me is history. Jeff, you're a history professor. Why isn't anybody interested?
Well, I just think it just made such common sense. I mean, who are we going to use these against? Boris Yeltsin? I mean, it's just common sense, and Bush is facing the realities. I think what we really need to do to save money is get our troops out of Europe and South Korea. I mean, this is what is soaking up such a huge amount of money in the military budget. And again, the same rationale applies. Who are they there to defend Europe against?
Right.
Boris Yeltsin leading the Russian hordes.
Is anybody talking about this at all? Maura? Anybody?
No, not really. We still have the weapons. I think people anticipated some sort of reduction. I hope we're not really stockpiling these in a centralized location like Bush
I
said,
think it's incredibly exciting.
Aside from
we
that,
did our first step back. I mean, we no longer have nuclear weapons flying around the Earth 24 hours a day as we've had for the last 35 years.
But it's been doing it for 35 years, and I don't think about it anymore. We're used to it.
All right, that's it. It's nothing. Blasé. All right, 1 minute left. Predictions. Marlene, you made yours. School board, the millage will fail.
Yes.
All right.
Unfortunately.
All right, anything else? Jeff?
I think this flap over dirty movies is just the beginning of an offensive by conservative students to use sexual issues as a way of stirring up public opinion.
Offensive over offensive movies.
We haven't heard the last of this.
All right, Maura Whalen, quickly.
Damn it, Gary, I'm a writer, not a psychic. I don't know.
All right, that's it. No prediction. All right, my prediction, we're going to go into this more next time. Just give you a little preview. David Duke is going to win the gubernatorial primary in Louisiana. That's all for this week. Bye-bye.